This is Tell Me Something Good About Retail with Bob Phibbs, the retail doctor. The champion for a more human connection in retail for over 30 years as a retail doctor. Bob is the authority on brick and mortar retail across the world, who works with some of the biggest luxury brands to independent retailers of all sizes.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of Tell Me Something Good About Retail. Today, I am with celebrated professional speaker, honored Cavett Award winner from the National Speakers Association, Mr. Brian Walter. He is known through his speaking, coaching, and consulting as one of the most interesting and fun guys I know in retail. And I am thrilled to have you on my podcast today, Brian.
I am thrilled to be talking about retail, which I don't think America talks enough about.
And because it's a fascinating detail in your world, and I'm sure you are always looking for examples to talk about retail, can you take us back to my goodness, the 80s?
Oh, right, great. You're gonna date check me. You're gonna date check
I'm just
me
saying
there.
because
I'm
started off
actually 43. I just aged poorly. That was yes.
I started off in retail in the 80s, and Brian started off in the 80s, and we were within a stone's throw
we
from
actually
each other.
crossed over a year at UCLA.
Yeah.
You could have pushed me down on the UCLA campus. And who knows? It could have happened.
So tell me, how did you ever get into retail?
Well, I got into retail first because I wanted to be cleaner. And you're thinking, how is that possible? Because my first job was at Wiener schnitzel. Now, Wiener schnitzel, I mean, technically, fast food restaurants are a type of retailer. It's like, and they'll hire any carbon-based life form who's willing to go there. And so, when you're in high school, what are the things you care about? You care about your hair. I'm wearing a brown paper hat, squishing it down. You care about your skin. I'm working the fries. I'm covered in grease and zits everywhere. It's like, you care about what you wear. I'm wearing a brown polyester uniform. And you care about your rep, your pride. And I work for a fast food place that's first two syllables are Wiener. I mean, this is not there. So I worked there junior in high school. And then I went to the Broadway Department Store in Southern California, and I could wear a blazer. Whoa, and you didn't get dirty. And so I was in there. There we go, high school. I was in for retail.
And were you like part-time? Did you start off in?
I was part-time because like you're a music guy. You're like a conductor, aren't you? I was a band geek. So I would be one of those guys that you bossed around with your little stick.
What was your instrument?
Trombone.
I love trombone. That was my secondary instrument.
There you go. And like my thought is like, and everyone listening, quick, name your favorite trombone player. Okay. Like you can't. Okay, there you go. But yeah, so I was part-time. And then when I was in college at UCLA during, Easter break and so I would come in and I would work as a rover, roving around, giving everybody breaks, which means I have the least amount of product knowledge in any department that I work at because I'm just there to give a break, but I can operate the cash register and take their money, so I can do that. And then I meet my future wife at UCLA, and we're going to get married at 22 and 21. I am 21 years old when I asked her father if I could marry her, and here was his deal. It's like, yes, under one condition. What's that? When you graduate in June, you will have a job. And so I started interviewing and everything was off campus. I mean, campus, they're going to move you, but my wife is a year behind me, so I couldn't move. And so they would go, can you move? No, okay, we're done. And I'm like, and it was 2 months out. Then it was 6 weeks out and I'm panicking. And then I went to the Broadway Department Store interview and they gave me a job. And I'm like, I love retail because I got to marry the girl. So basically I got into retail again because I'd worked there and I wanted to get married. So that's how I got into retail.
Yeah, but that's not your story. That's what I think is so fascinating. I said I'll never have any use to be working in retail. I put myself through college selling shoes in the Glendale Galleria, not too far away from UCLA. And I said, what's retail ever going to do? And of course, now the retail doc, you find that those experiences you had early on that you've said, oh, probably not that much, Although in your case, the Wiener schnitzel, probably not as much. But uh, you then took that, though, into a very different part of the Broadway Department Store, which ultimately did become uh, a linch post to who you became as a speaker, right?
Absolutely. I think of like the two department stores that I worked at in my, I guess, 11, 12-year department store career, retail career, was the Broadway in Southern California. And then after I got married, we moved up to Seattle and I worked for the Bon Marche. All of these are Macy's now because I think that's a law. Wasn't that a law that was passed that if you're a department store, you have to become a Macy's? I think,
They
I
had to
think so.
destroy all those old names and make them into one blonde.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, sign makers went out of business clearly because there's only Macy's. Actually, I learned today on a podcast why Macy's has a red star. It's not a communist thing. No, it's not. It's not Russia. The founder of Macy's, he first went into whaling, and he got a red star tattoo. And then I think he got tired of almost getting killed by whales, and so he said, "I'm going to become a retailer instead." And he kept his tattoo symbol for Macy's.
I have never heard that story in my life.
Today, this morning, while walking the dog, I found this out. See, retail's everywhere. But like you, Bob, I think, again, we're talking about passing laws that you have to be a Macy. I think there should be a law that every teenager, by the time you're 22, I think it should be a law that you should be required to work in retail at least for 6 months, because nothing's going to make you not be a schmuck as an adult than working and serving the public, at least for part of your life. I learned my biggest life lessons and professional life lessons working in retail.
And you'd give me an example of one of those by saying what? What would be one?
I would say one is the customer isn't always right, but you have to treat the customer as if they are right. And that tension and balance is where learning takes place. I remember, so I'm now in the executive management training program, which sounds very impressive.
I'm impressed.
I'm making $17,925 a year. Whoop, whoop. Oh my gosh, I was rolling in the dough. And of course, that's a nice way of saying we're going to train you, have a college degree, and we're going to train you to be a department manager. But again, got me the girl. Father-in-law was happy, so there I am. So I'm in the Santa Monica store, and I'm just learning to be a manager. And I, of course, took training, because you're a trainer very literally. And they said, okay, you can give a customer up to maybe 2 or 3 hangers, but that's it, because, we pay for these hangers here. So, I'll take the hanger out, put it down in the ginormous rack of hangers, fold everything. And if they ask for a hanger, it's, oh, sure, I'll give you a hanger. They ask for 2. It's like, okay, 2. If they say 3, maybe that was your judgment.
That's your judgment call. That was a lot of, you got a window there.
Yes. And then the customer says, I'd like hangers for all of those. I'd say, well, I'm sorry, sir, those are 5, and that exceeds our policy. And then he looks at me like I have a horn growing out of my head. And he said, that's cute. And he said, seriously, you're not going to give me 5 hangers? I'm like, well, no, sir. Our policy has been, I can't do that. And he said, well, I'd like to see a manager then. And then I say, I am a manager. And then he says, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. And then he goes, I'm going to go talk to a real manager. And he starts storming upstairs, because in the 80s, store managers lived on what floor? The 3rd floor. That's where their offices were. That's where HR, that's where all the good stuff is. And every customer knows that. So storms up there. And I'm like, this could be a problem. And of course, 4 minutes later, Bob, who do I get a call from?
The real store manager.
The real store manager is like, Brian, and you could tell that the customer's right down. It's like, Brian, I'm going to be sending down Mr. Hunter down to you, and you will be giving him his hangers. Thank you so much. And I'm like, now I'm not stupid. Obviously, wasn't wise yet, but I'm saying, so I, of course, grabbed 10 hangers and I wrapped them in tissue and I put them in the bag, and I'm waiting for the customer at the base of the escalator when he, gets down for the zigzag that we forced them to go through. And he goes down there. And I say, here you, sir, I've given you 10 hangers. I'm so sorry for the hassle that I unintentionally put it through. And then he leans in and he goes, you're never going to be a manager until you figure stuff like this out. And he didn't say stuff. And I said, yes, sir. And then he left. And I'm thinking, what a schmuck. And then I thought, and he's right. because there's the rules that are the rules, and then there's the what are the law of unintended consequences, and you only learn those things through pain. And the greatest thing is when you're in retail, you get a lot of responsibility when you're young and stupid, and that's how you become less young and less stupid.
I can't argue with that. I remember I had a guy walking into Glendale Galleria, and he turns to me after looking at the shoe department. He goes, "Is this all the shoes you have?" And I said without batting an eye, "Oh yeah, we have 3 more floors up above us. We just like people to guess what we have." And
Oh,
he goes, "Next time, take your bad mood out on somebody else." And the same thing, I was like, "Boy, did I show him?" And then it was like, "You work on commission, you idiot. What were you thinking?" But it did give you that aha moment, right? It's not like somebody put that on you. You had that aha moment. You're like, "Oh, I should probably change this, huh?"
yeah. I still even remember, even like as a 17-year-old, and I'm working Rovers again. Rover, I don't know the department, so I get put in women's shoes, which, you find me this in a size 8. I'm just running around. There's acres of shoes. Like, what am I doing? Finding it there. But I also learned it's like there was one woman. I remember, I'm 17 years old and getting in her and pulling out, and she's being very cautious. Here you go. And then she reluctantly pulls up her her slacks for me to put the shoe on. And then she starts getting very self-conscious and apologizing because I'm so sorry, because she had thick ankles and she was so concerned about that. And I realized it's my job right now to help her feel fantastic. And even how do you learn that as a 17-year-old? Because you're dealing with people. And here's this woman, it's like, and I'm like, it's ankles is, I don't know what you're talking about. All I know is this looks fantastic. And let me put the other one on here. It's like, walk around. It's like, blah, blah, blah. And I go, hey, Mary, call her. So, doesn't she look fantastic? Oh my gosh. And the woman started preening because I was merely kind and supportive, because why was she there? To buy shoes, to look fantastic. To learn that lesson as a 17-year-old, as an 18-year-old, that sticks with you the rest of your life.
That's beautiful. And I maintain, we go into a retail store, it's almost like we're asking for that person that you meet to give us permission to buy the item or to feel better about ourselves. There's something that I don't know what it is, but when you are on the other side of it, you feel like $1,000,000, and you're like, well, wait a minute, I could have done this myself. Not really. Something is different. It's very different when you get into a store. And I love all of these stories about how you were finding your way through retail, and then you end up making training videos.
Well, yeah. So first, I had to learn to. I would say there's the progression of the retail progression, which was first. It's like, okay, I have a job. I'm happy I have a job. Then you start learning things through the job, and then you make mistakes, and then you learn to be clever, and then you discover what your magic is. To me, that's the sequence. Like I remember the first time I learned to be clever. And so, we have the concept in retail we call the walkthrough. Now, you are the retail doctor. Do they still call it the walkthrough?
They still call it the walkthrough.
Okay, so this is like a half-century old term. It's like, okay, if you work in there, it's like, Mary Schmedlap, the divisional vice president of fill in the blank, is going to be popping by your store / your department, your franchise, blah, blah, blah.
Tomorrow morning, and you better be on your game.
Exactly. And so, like 3 days before, my boss, the divisional, is telling me, Brian, the big bosses are coming to town, and you have to make your department look clean and pristine. I'm like, clean and pristine? We have a sale coming up. I have like 17 acres worth of ginormous comforter boxes that are clogging up the hallway to the doors, and I'm breaking a fire code already. And they're like, well, make this look nice. I'm like, there's no room in the stock room. And then they said, figure it out.
Ooh, a window open.
Okay, it's like figure it out. And so this was where things were only partially computerized, because we had that paper computerized era, which is pretty much the 80s and early 90s. So I took about 20 boxes of comforters, and I created what is called a ghost transfer, where I filled in, it's like, let's send these to the Broadway and I just thought of, where does my uncle live? Bakersfield, California, Nowheresville, where I figured they weren't as sophisticated as, Los Angeles. So so the next day, they came and they picked up the truck and they took it over there. And when they did the walkthrough 2 days later, my department looked fantastic. I get a thumbs up from the boss. This is great. And then another 2 days by, I get a frantic phone call from Bakersfield saying, why did we suddenly get all of this stuff? And I said, oh my gosh, it's a mistake. Please send it right back. And they do. And then about a week later, apparently this shows up in a report, and my boss came by and they said, what did you do? And I explained it. And this is what she said. It's like, that was not something you're supposed to do. Very clever, though, very clever. And don't let me catch you doing that again. Well done. We got a good review. And I'm like, oh, there's process, there's systems, reviews. And I also learned what I later learned as a manager. It's like, if you create rules that can only succeed when people break them, that's not leadership. So one, I liked being clever. I liked getting a thing. But even at 23 years old, I learned this is stupid. And as I become a manager, I need to become a wiser manager. And so, again, these are the type of lessons you get in retail, which is, I just think, amazing.
Well, and you had that freedom. I think there was a certain freedom to figuring it out. I think nowadays retail is an awful lot of people telling other people, do this, do that, and then almost removing the mind from it. So they're not supposed to be creative and figure things out. And I think that's a danger, because to your point, you learned that in one way. I remember when you said the blankets, my gosh, the Broadway used to have a blanket sale. And I remember when I first started, our store manager's like, we got to beat whoever it was, we got to beat past it. We got to sell more blankets. And I'm like, guys, findings, that's underwear and socks. How am I going to just casually go, want a blanket? And she goes, I don't care, figure it out. And I guess I did. And, that was kind of the game. I guess that's the other part of it, was there's a certain amount of game playing when you first started in retail. And you're like, oh, so this is how it works.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right.
And to me, one of my press moments was seeing it go to my next generation. So my oldest daughter also went into retail for a number of years. Now she works for Zillow because, Zillow is pretty darn cool and probably pays better than retail. But anyways, she first started, she was working for Kohl's, and then she worked for Aldo Shoes. And then she got recruited and worked for Suit Supply. And she became like a regional manager for Suit Supply.
Yeah,
but as she was like a store manager, I love seeing the human part comes in again. So she's selling and she's saying, so Dad, it's like, when a guy comes in and he doesn't know what he wants, it's like, I'm going to make $1 gazillion because he just wants my opinion. I'm just going to tell him what he should want. And he's like, yes, please. But then when he comes in with another woman, so I've got to figure out instantly, is this a friend? Is this a girlfriend? Is this a fiance? Is this a spouse? Do I need to align? Do I need to make her my best buddy? It's both of us against him, both of us with him. Do I need to tell him to sit in the corner where I just sell to her? Or is he actually nervous about her and I somehow have to help him win without pissing her off? It's like the psychology of this is amazing. And again, it's like you don't get any of that on Amazon. You just click and buy, which is why retail therapy, I believe, only works for people when it's in person.
Oh, I love that. I agree with that too. And, if you look at returns in retail, it's 60% is apparel. It just doesn't do the same. You get it and it's like, I don't know. But you get it home, you get a new outfit, you want to show everybody, because I always say in retail, if you just think what changed in their life to walk in the door today, they want to get the guy, the girl, they just moved, they just found out they're pregnant, they're hopeful. That's why they're there. People who are depressed at 10 a.m. in the morning are in a bar. They're not at the department store. So how do we just have fun with that? So how did you transition from clever man?
So they're clever guy to basically I moved up to Seattle because my wife graduated and got a job with Procter & Gamble. And so since she was doing, we moved up to Seattle and I worked at a political campaign for about 6 months. And there it is, November, and my candidate won. And they're like, okay, so you're ready for your job in county government. And I'm like, I'm 24 years old. I don't want to work in county government. So I start interviewing and it's now like November. And so I get a job as Christmas help for the Broadway Department Store, which was kind of a drop down, from where I'd been before. But then I screwed up my courage and went to the director of training and said, you should hire me. And he said, well, why would I want to hire you? I said, well, there's this new thing called video production here. And you're going to want to make training videos. And he said, well, that's true. Do you have a video production background? Well, no, I don't. However, I said, so if this was a big market like LA or New York, you could find a video guy and make him a retailer, or take a retailer and make him a video guy. And so I said, I'm already a retail guy, so I can write, I know what service looks like. And I just had to figure out this technical stuff. And then he said, do you have a writing sample? I said, of course. Did I have a writing sample, Bob?
Probably not.
I did not. So literally went home that night and made stuff up. I came in and I got hired in 1986 to be a videographer in the training department, which I had no business getting there. Then I did that for a while. And then they had a department, they had a trainer leave and they said, hey, Brian, you used to be a department manager and you're pretty glib. Fast on your feet and glib were the two attributes given to me. Would you like to be a trainer? Yes, I'll be a trainer. Then I can be a trainer. Then I become an internal communications guy. And then my old director of training is now the vice president of advertising. And I kid you not, I get offered the job of broadcast production director, having never touched a radio or TV commercial in my entire life. That's what can happen in retail, which is like, you can be young if you're sharp and you go for stuff, you'll be given opportunities. Now, if you screw up, well, you're gone. I mean, they will, boom, everything. But you can pull stuff off. And I was the retail guy, and that actually led to my next thing. So I did that for a number of years. And then I kind of realized I didn't want to be the best retail broadcast TV and radio guy in the world. And I thought I'm ready for something else. And so I leave, I start working for a training guy. And then the biggest break of my entire professional life came the CEO of the Bon Marche, Ira Piquel. I don't know why I still remember that name. Maybe it's good. Who names their child? Ira Piquel. I don't know. So he said, we had a bad year from a gross margin point of view. We have to get everybody buzzing about gross margin improvement. If I yell at them, that's not going to work. Remember that funny guy who used to work here? Have him come back and do something about gross margin improvement. So I get this call. I'm now a member of the National Speakers Association, just trying to figure out the speaking training thing. And they said, oh, well, we have these monthly meetings where we get all the top, like 300 people in the company there. And Ira Piquel wants to use something about gross margin improvement. Oh, okay. And at that point, that was when David Letterman was huge. And so the Bon Marche we called the Bon. And so I came up with a late meeting show with David Letterman.
Oh.
And I did a meeting once a month for 6 months. We had I came out, I did a top 10 list, the top 10 reasons why America is obsessing over Monica Lewinsky instead of Liz Claiborne, and we had we had musical guest, Elvis. Instead of return to sender, it becomes return to vendor. That's right. Return to vendor. It's like put stuff on trucks. I hate to do this, but my merch sucks. Just had, and it was amazing. And then I started getting hired hey, will you do the home sale kickoff meeting? Will you do the back to school thing? And I did all these bits. And then one day I get a call out of the blue. Brian, I hear you're an expert at making boring meetings interesting. And I said, yes. And that's when the rest of my career took off. And it's all because of retail.
That is fascinating. We're going to take a little break here, come back after a word from our sponsor, SalesRx, online retail sales training platform, and created by yours truly, without the top 10 list from Monica Lewinsky. And we'll continue right after this break. Hey, it's Bob again. I'm not only your host, but also the founder of the SalesRx online retail sales training program. How many sales that should have been yours walked out your front doors today? With shoppers being more discerning about where and when they shop, You need to convert more lookers to buyers. And SalesRx is the perfect solution to make training memorable. It's bite-sized, it can fit easily into your schedules. Don't tell me you don't have time to train. If you can give them time to take a break, you have time for them to train. Now, the training builds from some of the quickest ways to engage shoppers to the most advanced. Everything is planned so you can implement your sales training program with a click of a button. And there's a reason we're on 4 continents training thousands, because SalesRx is scalable. Everybody learns the same new skills that will grow your sales. In fact, 83% of users report a double-digit increase in their sales within 6 months. Wouldn't you like that to be your story? Visit SalesRx to learn more and set up a call with me to see how we can help. That's SalesRx.com. Now back to the broadcast. So that's your big moment, and you've been asked now to start doing this for other people. So, your personality is certainly bubbly and effusive. Did you have something like comedy, improv training, or something that brought that out of you? Because I'm still picturing this 17-year-old with zits and covered in grease at the Wiener schnitzel. It's not the same guy.
Oh, it sort of is the same guy because, when you're in band, you're a band what? You're a band geek.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. See, we all knew that, the band geek. And you think things are funny, like, how do you make a trombone sound like a French horn? You put your hand in the bell and miss all the high notes. You drop a conductor and a watermelon off of a 10-story building. Which one will hit the ground first? Who cares? So
this is what we had to work with, folks.
This is what we had to work with here. Yeah. So basically, I was, I got to be honest, I was in the bell curve of attractiveness and coolness. I was in the bell part of it, and so I was just learned how to be funny, but kind of a positive funny, because if you're sarcastic, fuzzy, other people back then, bullying was not only allowed, it was like a best practice, and I once, in like junior high, you get put in a trash can. It's like, now, of course, this would be like an intervention, but then that would just happen. And so I learned I could talk my way out of anything. I could make them laugh. And so that was like a survival. I'm not a survival, like I could have been a bully in my neighborhood, but I just like that became my superpower of I could be positive and funny and friendly, and it made people want me to be around. And so again, when you get into retail, it's like you talk to people. You talk people into buying things. You talk people into feeling good about what they buy. And then when I got into advertising, you had to talk people into approving what you are, pitching for a radio or TV commercial. You have to be persuasive. And then once it translates into, my majority of my time in my profession, which is like when you're on stage at a meeting or when you're in front of a group of people training them, you need to use your words. It's like, it's not all slides, it's not all systems, it's not all CBT, it's not all, thing. Like you have to inspire, motivate, encourage people to want to do what you want them to do, because like you're, of course, the king of retail training, especially retail sales training. And it's like the core part of training is you have to do something different. What you're doing now ain't good enough. We have a new way. And it's like, well, when you tell people, it's like, so that thing you've been doing like for years, don't do that anymore. It's like, what is a safe way for people to discover that they're wrong, also in such a way that they want to do it a new way? That's verbal persuasion, and that's where what I call my projectile enthusiasm.
Thanks. Got that exorcist.
Yeah, there you go. Enthusiasm here. Like I say, I can be interested in anything, in absolutely anything. And so, it's like when it comes to like when I was training, people in like I was here with you, sorry, when I was a department manager. And I had a new person and I was training them. It's like, okay, how do you motivate people? And so I was watching them. It was in the evening and I was in the comforter department, and a woman came in and she's like, okay, I like this rose colored, comforter. I said, great. And I had my employee come up, and she said, "Oh, is there something matching?" And he said, "Yes, there's a rose, like a dust not cover. What were they called? A dust ruffle. That's what they were called, a dust ruffle thing, which I did not know what those until I was 23 years old. A dust ruffle." And he goes into the back room to get it. And he's there for a long time. Like, "Excuse me, let me go in." So I'm going around. I'm like, "What's going on?" He goes, "I've looked everywhere. We don't have a queen size rose dust ruffle." And I said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to go out there and tell her we don't have one." I said, "No, you're not." He said, "Because we're in the business of selling things. And so you're going to take an ecru, don't say beige, because beige sounds like $9.99. Ecru sounds like $19.99. So you're going to take an ecru queen size dust ruffle. And you're going to go out there and you say, 'I'm so sorry. It took me so long. We didn't have the rose colored one, but I kept looking, and whoof, we had one more queen size ecru one, because the style is now to have contrast here.' And I said, 'If she will buy it, and if she doesn't, I will buy you lunch tomorrow.'" And so suddenly he's like, "Well, so suddenly this is now a game." So he struts out there, and I realized before she gave her an answer, I said, no matter what happens, I as a manager can't lose, because he's now motivated. And he's like, "If she buys it," which she did, "I'm freaking brilliant." And he's going to be, "Wow, what else can you show me, Yoda?" Right? And if she doesn't, he would come back and he would probably say, "No, you don't have to do it." And I said, No, I'm going to do it, because you know what? Next time she will. Now, granted, this was in the 80s, and that would have cost me $3 at McDonald's. So that was not a big bet. But still, like when we gamify things, and so much of speaking and training is really like, how do we get people to care more about the nuances of their job? And that's what continues to make me have projectile enthusiasm.
I love that. And the name of your company is Extreme Meetings, correct?
Extreme Meetings, yes.
So why is it Extreme Meetings? Like, who is your ultimate client, and what are you telling them these days? I don't think it's about ecru comforters, but maybe.
It could be if that's what it took. So no, with Extreme Meetings, it's like when you're having a live in-person meeting or hybrid these days, there's few things you can do that's more expensive as a company. Now, in the past, we used to get together all the time. Now with Zoom and, Google Meetup and, all of the different versions that we have virtually, like we don't meet as much in person. So the stakes are higher when we meet in person now, because how do you communicate your company's culture? This is what we reward. This is what we punish. This is what's important. Your leaders actually have strategies. This is how people believe it when they see, right, their leaders are in person talking to them. It's such a precious time. And too often it's hideously boring and blah, 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 blah. And so I provide what I call customized infotainment, which is it's going to be exciting and fun and interactive, but it's not entertainment. If it was entertainment, I would be juggling flaming cats or something like that. I mean, like, yes, that's fun, but I think I saw something better on America's Got Talent. So, But when it's infotainment, then it's all about them. And I remember one executive I was doing something, I was talking about using flags for polling instead of funds, instead of using your phone. And he said, how do I know this isn't going to be hokey? And I said, oh, well, first, hokey's the death word. You have to stab that to death like a vampire. I mean, right away. And I said, well, actually, fortunately, I can guarantee it would be impossible for it to be perceived as hokey. And he's like, well, how could you do that, Brian? Because all of the examples of things that we're talking about and voting on and pulling them down are about their daily work lives and their culture and environment. And it's impossible for that to be hokey unless you think their lives are hokey, Bob.
Is that
no. But still, it's like, even though I kind of set him up on that part, but still, it's like when no one cares about our stuff, being like our store, our franchise, our thing as much as we do, and the people who work there. And so when you can tease and make fun and do trivia about it, they go crazy and they're more emotionally bought in. So that's why I created Extreme Meetings. So the extreme is extreme engagement, extreme interaction, extreme caring, because otherwise it's going to be, let's show the sales forecast. And it's so tiny, if you're past the fourth row, you can't see the numbers anyways. So that we change that to Originally, I was going to call it How to Make Bad Corporate Meetings Suck Less, but I figured that might have been too judgmental.
Maybe. I'm just for an idea.
Maybe.
Well, listen, you have been a great guest. I've enjoyed this a lot. I always close off all of our podcasts with asking you one question. So the name of the podcast is Tell Me Something Good About Retail. So tell me something good about retail.
Something about retail is the place where we still have what I'll call commercial joy. Like when you buy not stuff, but something important to you, you feel great. I have a 2.5-year-old grandson, and he's into planes, and I went to the Boeing Museum of Flight, and he's looking, planes, grandpa, planes. And then we went into the museum store. I'm like, they took our last name and made it his first name, Walter. So I said, okay, Walter, pick out a plane. And he went through this bin of planes, and he's trying to, and he picked up this one. Now, of course, did I just buy him one plane, Bob? No, because he has two hands. So he's like, dude, grandpa, planes. And that was like months ago, and he's still playing with it today. It's like, that was a moment. Now, of course, I spent time and we do stories and things like that, but there was a special type of experience that goes like, here is this child. They're in a store. Everything is amazing. And I got to buy him something and watch him play with it. And that was what I call commercial. I was doing a commercial activity that the store wanted. They wanted to move some merchandise, but because the way they displayed things, they had open bins of things that he could touch and choose. And I could teach him like, okay, that one's called an Airbus. And he's like, Airbus. And like, that one's called Air Force One, but that's a lot. So we'll just say one. Okay, Airbus, one. That was joy. None of that would have happened if I had done that on Amazon. That's what I think is something great about retail today.
Oh my gosh. Well, how do we find out more about you, Mr. Walter?
So you could go to extrememeetings.com if you're in the meetings business or having meetings. You're like, how do we sexy up our meetings so our employees stay awake and care? That would be a place. And like you, I'm also in the training biz, and I have a business called Sticky Training, which is if you have a training department, you're like, how could our stuff be stickier? And I've got licensed techniques that they can use to be almost as crazy as me.
That's great. Well, you've been a joy to have with us today, my friend, and we're going to look forward to more extreme meetings and more craziness, but more importantly, to capturing that joy in commercial areas. So thanks for your time, Brian.
Absolutely.
You've been listening to Tell Me Something Good About Retail with Bob Phibbs, the Retail Doctor. As a listener, you can receive free information and guides when you visit retaildoc.com and sign up for our exclusive weekly newsletter. Thanks for being with us. Remember to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. To virtually bring Bob to all of your crew and associates, check out www.salesrx.com.